You ready? Let's do it. All right, welcome to another episode of the GROklahoma Podcast, where we spotlight the people and projects shaping clinical and translational research in Oklahoma and beyond. Today, I'm thrilled to introduce an associate professor of epidemiology at the Hudson College of Public Health here at the University of Oklahoma Health Sciences. She also serves as Assistant Dean of Sovereignty, Opportunity, Belonging, and Engagement, and holds the prestigious President's Associate Presidential Professorship. I dare to say that 3 times without blabbing. Her research focuses on platelet disorders such as immune thrombocytopenia, ITP, and thrombotic thrombocytopenic purpura, TTP. Beyond the lab and clinic, she's been a tireless advocate for patient-centered science, health equity, mentoring, and inclusivity. She's also served in leadership roles within the American Society of Hematology, including as chair of the Hematology Inclusion Pathway Study Section. In today's conversation, we'll explore the human side of research, the importance of representation in science, and the networks that sustain meaningful scholarship here in Oklahoma and across the country. Everyone, please join me in welcoming Dr. Dee Terrell to the podcast. Hello.
Hello.
All right. And thanks for kind of getting on here. Let's start with the beginning because your journey really is remarkable. Growing from rural roots to national leadership. Could you tell us a little bit about those early days, how you grew up, and if possible, what experiences planted the seed for your research in science and your interest in science and health?
Yeah, so like you said, I grew up in a rural town in Oklahoma. I graduated with like 13 people. That's how small it was. And so I think that for me, I was a good student. I was always a good student. Science was always interesting. And so I knew I wanted to do something in science. I knew I wanted to help people. My brother had cancer when I was young. He actually died when I was 12. And then my mom had multiple sclerosis. And so she probably got diagnosed when I was maybe 13 or 14. And so by the time I graduated high school, my mom was in a wheelchair and, we were taking care of her and all of the things. And so I think that really made me want to do something I thought I wanted to be a doctor. I thought I wanted to help people that way. And so I went to college thinking I wanted to be a doctor. And I realized probably my freshman year that I didn't want to be a doctor. I didn't want to go to school that long. I didn't want to see people naked. There were so many reasons. And so I was in this biology degree, kind of not knowing what I wanted to do. I kind of went back and forth. I knew I didn't want to. People were like, well, if you're not going to be a doctor, then you need to be a science teacher. And I was like, I don't want to do that. And people were like, well, you can be a chemist. And I was like, I hate the lab, so I just kind of was like, I knew I couldn't change my major though, because I was paying for school myself and it was a really expensive school. So I was like, I have to graduate in 4 years. Don't know what I'm gonna do with this biology degree. And it was funny because it was the summer between my junior and senior year. I was just in the science building, which is funny because I wasn't taking a class. So who knows why I was in the building. But my professor, his name was Dr. Hurley, and he was cleaning out, flyers, and he was cleaning up the science rooms. And he threw away a flyer, and I just happened to look at it, and it said open house at the College of Public Health. And wow. And I was reading it, and it said, biostatistics and epidemiology. And what's funny is, even when I was a freshman in college, I kept saying that I want to study disease. That's what I kept saying. I want to study disease. And so people just kept saying, well, you're going to be a doctor then. And I was like, okay. And then, so once I knew that I didn't want to be a doctor, I didn't know there was another option. And so whenever I said, what's epidemiology? He was like, well, it's the study of disease. I was an idiot, right? And I was like, oh my gosh, that's what I want to do. And he was like, well, you should call and, go visit with some of these people. And that's what I basically did. I emailed and I went to the College of Public Health and I met with Dr. Beebe, and she actually introduced me. She was like super pregnant at the time. I think she was like, I can't remember if she was a grad student or she had just joined faculty. And she just like kind of took me down the hall, and I would just meet people and I'd ask them what they did. And then, yeah, I applied and started my path as an epidemiologist.
Wow. I mean, there's so much to unpack from that. First of all, sorry to hear about your brother. And looking back now, the story kind of wrote itself for you. You know, your brother's experience, and then also with your mom, and the passion you bring into your work. Everything makes sense now. Thank you for sharing that. And also kudos to just being there. Talk about the timing, you know, walking into that biology lab and hearing about epidemiology and then finally making that connection. But kudos to you for seeing it through, for showing up at College of Public Health and seeing it through, because I feel like there's so many opportunities that comes our way sometimes. But if we don't follow through with it, we never know what's going to be at the end of it. So I want to just tease that out, and thank you for sharing all of that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you went to school through all that. Can you, so coming from your background and, you know, sorry, what part of Oklahoma? I'm just curious to know where you had 13 people in your class. What part of Oklahoma was that?
So I'm from a town called Dover, Oklahoma. So it's really central Oklahoma. So most people have heard of Okarche because they have Aishin's chicken there. And so Dover is about 20 minutes north of Okarche. And so if you've ever been to Enid, you've gone through Dover. We're right on Highway 81. And so the big city is Enid or Kingfisher.
Wow. I am Googling it now, and they still have about 464 people there.
Yeah.
Wow. So when you left, you took like half of the town with you. How was it like growing up there? I imagine that it wasn't super diverse. And did you have a Walmart?
No, there's no Walmart in Dover.
How was like what brought you guys there? Was it your dad's work or your mom's work? Like how?
So my dad actually is a farmer, right? So I'm first generation college. So my dad's a farmer. And my dad grew up in Dover. You know, his family's from Dover. And so his dad was a farmer. And so we have land and everything that my dad like had, you know, inherited or whatever you want to call it. And so yeah, I mean, Dover is just where our family has always been, since really early on. Like we can trace it back, you know, like, so there's like just, you know, we have what we call the down homestead, you know, like where that's the land that like was given to my grandparents, you know, like if you trace the whole thing back, whenever land was given to Black people, you can like trace it to them.
Okay.
And so, yeah, so that's where, and my mom is from Watonga, which is a small town also in Oklahoma. And so my parents actually met at church, but I have a feeling my mom was at church and my dad was not. And so but the way he told the story is he saw her and he knew that was the woman he was going to marry. And so, yeah. And so he actually took my mom from the big city of Watonga to Dover, and there you have it.
Oh, look at that. I just Googled it. It's like an hour away from Oklahoma City. It's not too far away. Wow. Okay. So, thank you. If you could describe your educational pathway, like, you know, from Dover to the big city, Oklahoma City, and, you know, getting your PhD and all of that, what would you say were some of things that really supported it the most? Because I imagine moving, you know, to Oklahoma City and having to go through the grinds of grad school wasn't quite a walk in the park. What are some protective factors you would say you had?
What are some protective factors?
Yes, that really helped you thrive in the graduate program, you know.
I thought you were going to ask it the other way. So now I'm like, What?
We can answer it the other way if you want me to. If you want to.
I was ready for challenges. I was like, okay, wait, what are some of the things that help me? I think that I'm really close to my family. So like I'm really close to my sister and my dad, and you know, when my dad was alive. And so, and I say that in a way which is funny because my dad was also the person who was always like, don't get a big head, you know, like just because you have an education doesn't mean you're a big deal or whatever. And so it was in a weird protective way, like it kept me humble, if that makes sense. Like it grounded me because my family, like I'm just very close to I was, growing up close to my grandmother who was also in Dover, and, like my aunts and everybody. So I think, and like my cousins live in Dover and stuff like that. So I think just kind of having family close kept me, kind of able to keep going. And I think I also have a very strong faith. And so just, being able to trust that God's going to see you through kind of thing. So yeah.
Okay. Thank you for sharing that. And family mechanisms are very supportive, and I can imagine those really helped you during those tough times. The challenges, I'm sure we'll pick that up, as you're talking, but I just wanted to focus on the positive parts of it. Now let's talk about your research. I'm just going to call it TTP and ITP because, it's such a word that you can trip over easily. Now, you are very passionate about that, right?
Yes.
We know that from doing a quick research before you got on this, I know there are about 3,000 to 4,000 new cases diagnosed each year. And TTP, even though it's rare, carries a mortality risk of nearly 10 to 20% without prompt treatment. So much of your work has focused on these platelet disorders, but also bringing the patient's voice into the science. Why has that been so important to you? And for those who are not familiar with the conditions, you can just highlight what that is about as well.
Yeah, that's a great question. So, so like you mentioned, both of these disorders that I work with are platelet disorders. And so with ITP, what happens is it's an autoimmune disease where your body attacks your platelets. And so you basically have a really low platelet count, which is called thrombocytopenia. And the immune means that it's, autoimmune. And we don't know why. Just like with any autoimmune disease, we know that there's a genetic predisposition and then there's some kind of environmental trigger, right? And so once that flip gets switched, you get ITP. And so with that condition, I actually worked as a clinical trials coordinator when I got my master's. And while I was getting my PhD, I worked full time. And so with that condition, I noticed that, as a clinical trials coordinator, I was one of the first people who got a drug called Nplate to the market. And so there was people who would come in and to our trials, and they had had this disease for years, and they were so depressed, and they just felt like nothing was ever going to work because they had tried so many different treatments, right? And they were just pretty much resigned. And then this drug worked. And the drug worked by basically making more platelets circulate in their system. And so it basically kind of like your bone marrow is where your platelets come out. And so it was kind of pushing more platelets out. And so even though your body was attacking them, there was more in circulation. And just, I was able to just see their lives change. Like, they went from, some people who had no hope to people who had hope, and people were living their lives again. And they were just like, wow. And I kind of just saw the power of, clinical trials or treatment. And so that's one of the things, is just like seeing the change in patients and being able to understand like the impact of disease on them. And then for the other disease I work with, TTP, a lot of times these patients, after they're better, they have a lot of problems with their memory and their concentration. They have fatigue, and they just tell me stuff like, I don't feel like the same person I was before. And we would have these patient support group meetings, and people would just say that over and over again. And my mentor, Dr. George, at the beginning, he would just basically be like, okay, well, you were just really sick. You're going to get better. Like that's you're just feeling that way because you were just really sick.
Yeah.
And then after a while of keep hearing it, he was like, well, maybe there's something here. And so we started doing some quality of life, the SF-36, which is like a standard instrument to do quality of life with at the time. And we noticed that they did seem to have lower or worse quality of life on certain of those domains than what we'd expect when you compare to the general population. And so then what happened is that I got a KO1 award where I got some additional training. in really qualitative methods and mixed methods. And I'm using that to really understand from the patient's perspective how this disease impacts them. And so I'm able to, and I say for that disease, most physicians are focusing on relapse and they're focusing on treatment, and nobody's really talking to the patient about what's going on with you, even after we call you better. And so I feel like for me, it really helps fill that part where, so like the part of my story I didn't tell is that right after grad school, I started working at the health department, and I was working as an epidemiologist. And I lasted a whole 11 months. And so I would go and I would do these trainings, or I would do these talks to the community, and I would tell them about diabetes and the stats and everything. And I remember just being frustrated because I always talked to community, like to nurses, or I always talked to doctors. I never talked to the people with diabetes themselves. And I remember asking about that, and they were like, well, no, the nurse educators talk to the patients, like that's not your job. Your job is to tell them, and then they will go and take that information. And so that's one of the reasons why I actually reached out to Dr. Sarah Vesely, and I said, this isn't a good fit for me. Do you know of any jobs that I should apply for? And she said, have you ever thought about doing clinical trials? And I was like, no, and I was like, I'm not a nurse. I thought a clinical trials coordinator had to be a nurse. And she was like, well, talk to Jim George. And so, she was like, our clinical trials coordinator is leaving. And so I went and I met with him, and I told him, look, because, he's just a guy that wants to talk to you about your whole life. And so I told him the whole, I don't want to be a doctor. I don't want to touch people, And he was like, I've never had a clinical trials coordinator that wasn't a nurse. And he was like, so how would that work? And we just sat there and we started talking. And he was like, what can you bring to the position that a nurse couldn't? And I said, I am trained in research methodology, so I can help make sure you do a good study. And I said, I can't draw blood, but what I can do is help you do good research. And he was like, you know what? The cancer nurses can draw the blood, and you could do everything else. And I said, yeah, I was like, he's like, drawing blood is easy. Don't you want to learn? I said, no, I don't want to touch. I don't want to see nobody naked.
You didn't
I
go
don't
to
want
med
to
school
touch
for
people.
that, exactly.
Exactly. I was like, no, it's not about if it's easy or hard. It's about the fact that I don't want to do it, And so he was like, well, let's try it. And so it was funny because I went back, because I took my lunch break and I did the interview. And by the time I got back to my desk, he called me at work. This was before cell phones, y'all. And so he called me at my office number and was like, you're hired.
Oh, see how you just made a way for yourself. That's impressive, man.
Exactly.
Wow.
Yeah. And so anyway, so I say all that to say, I have always been interested in the patient voice, but I couldn't figure out how with a PhD to hear it. And so once I got my KO1 training, I've found my fit, I really felt like, okay, now I have all the training I need. I have the quantitative training and I have the qualitative training. I have the mixed methods training to where now I can see, a research proposal, and I can see where I can put in, interviews or focus groups or whatever it is so that I can hear patients. And so that's kind of how, a very long-winded way of how I kind of found kind of my passion, like you said, like hearing the patient say stuff like, I'm just a shell of myself, I'm a burden to my family. And then I'm able to now take those quotes and put them on a screen at an annual meeting somewhere and help hematologists know that these people are better, but they're not better. Right.
Yeah.
And so that's how I, one of the last, I was at an ISTH meeting a couple months ago, and that's how I ended it. I ended my talk by saying, when you guys tell them they're better, they're not better. And so you need to be able to listen to them and ask them these questions, because the labs don't tell them the whole story. Yeah. And, people came up to me after, they were like, thank you, because so that's kind of where I love this place of just being able to say like the patients might not tell you this, but this is what they're
Yeah.
feeling,
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
that's the other
Yeah.
thing is sometimes they don't feel comfortable telling their doctor for
Everything.
various
Yeah.
reasons, right?
Yeah. 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 And if you even have patients from different backgrounds, maybe immigrant populations where they feel like talking to a doctor about what they're going through is a waste of the doctor's time. So they'll rather just internalize it.
Right.
And then nodding their head doesn't necessarily mean they know what, they're agreeing. It's just like,
Right.
let's just get the conversation over with. Wow, wow.
Right.
Thanks for that. And,
Right.
just hearing your story and how you created a role for yourself within that clinical trial. I mean, that's something that I think will resonate with a lot of our younger folks who might be listening to this. So I guess the moral of that story is go for it, okay? Even if there's no job description, create one for yourself.
Yep.
Especially in times like this, the streets are hard out there, okay?
It
Now,
is.
you might as well, yeah, yeah. You've worked with qualitative and mixed methods approaches, right? What have these methods revealed to you about the human side of disease that clinical measures alone might miss? And you kind of hinted at that when you talked about carving a role
Mhm.
for yourself and what was missing for you,
Yes.
for example, when you worked at the Department of Health.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah. So I think I think that, that's what I've learned. I think that when I got my master's in epidemiology, I really gave a side eye to qualitative methods. I really did. Like, just being completely honest, I really felt like they were soft and squishy science. And I was like, all you're doing is talking to people. I didn't understand, like how powerful they really are.
Mm,
And I didn't understand the rigor and the validity that goes into it if you do it right. And
mm,
so
mm,
I would say that, like, now I just really feel like there's going to be times. We're doing a study right now I'm doing a student with a student where we're looking at the impact of oral health on the impact of ITP on oral health.
mm.
And that is something that's never been asked before. So these patients, when they have a low platelet count, obviously they bleed in their mouth, right?
Yeah,
And so
yeah.
what happens, we're finding out, is sometimes then they don't brush their teeth, right? Because there's blood or whatever. And it's interesting because that's not something. I've been working in ITP for over 20 years, and no one ever talks about the oral part.
A
And
part
so
of it, yeah.
the student is a dentist from India. And so she came to me and was
Mm,
like, like, what about oral health? And I was like, oh, that's a really good question. I don't,
mhm,
and so what we're doing right now is we're developing a discussion guide, and we're going to ask questions like, have, like, are you delayed in dental treatment? Like, are you having to get extra referrals? I'm sorry, extra, like, authorizations?
yeah,
Are you
yeah.
having to, is your insurance denying it? Like, and so, but also we did a valid instrument called the oral health, I don't know, OHIP 14,
Okay.
and people were reporting pain. And
Wow.
one of the hematologists was like, why would they have pain? And so we're going to explore that. We're going to explore,
Mm,
and so
mm,
I think that's the beauty of mixed methods, is you're able to kind of,
yeah.
use the quantitative to either ask some qualitative questions or use the qualitative to ask more quantitative questions. And I think that
Yeah.
it's a really beautiful thing when you do it right. You're able to,
Mm,
like, really have that whole picture, which is the goal, right? Is to be able to
mm.
say, you know, like, one without the other doesn't always tell you what you
The
need to
whole
know.
story. Yes, 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 yes. Yeah, okay. Sounds good. Thanks so much for sharing that. And there's so much to ask you, Mr. Ferdinand. All right. Let's talk about Oklahoma a little bit. Now, research is about science, but it's also about access. And Oklahoma, I think, provides a unique context for this next set of conversation. Now, in Oklahoma, nearly 1 in 4 residents live in rural communities. And there's a lot of barriers like transportation, insurance coverage, and also limited access to specialty providers. Now, from your perspective, what barriers do you see most persistently for patients here in Oklahoma, and how is your work trying to shift those?
Mm. I think the barriers that my patients face is just low income.
Mm,
And so I think that, and I guess my work per se isn't shifting that, but what I do and what I try and teach all of my students is to be sensitive to that. And
mm,
so what we do is, when we do a study, and I teach this in our clinical trials class too, is like, recognize that everybody can't take off at, an hour from work. And so like offer them some weekends, offer them some nights, offer them, other times to come in. And then the other thing that I do is I recognize that my patients need Visa gift cards. A Walmart gift card isn't helpful for them. An Amazon gift card isn't helpful for them. I have patients who they use that gift card to put on their electric bill, and they're literally, needing that money for things like that. And so, so that's one thing that I recognize is that, patients in Oklahoma are often facing some true issues, and I think that also makes me more humble. The fact that they're willing to spend the time with me is it, you have to recognize that like, and I think I'm learning this as I get older, is just like, it's not, I think sometimes as researchers, we look at it like patients are getting something out of our studies, but really like without them, we couldn't do this. Right. And so just kind of flipping that to realize that like recognizing the effort that it takes the patient to come to you and to make sure that you do something with that, right? Whether it is presenting it or publishing it or whatever. And I think the other piece of that is, which is not part of your question, but my son has an autoimmune disease. And so just from a parent side, when I bring him to visits, it's, like it's an all day affair. He's all stressed out. And I realize now just like, oh my gosh, like how much work it goes into and how much you have to like rearrange your life to like do some of these visits, right? Like, so for me, I'm like, you coming in for 45 minutes and then you go back to your thing. But it's like, no, I had to either ask off work. I had to arrange childcare. I had to do, all of the things in order to come to Harold Ham and see you for an hour or whatever. And so I think definitely I hope that I'm starting to kind of value that and I don't know, in a better way. I also think that in Oklahoma, our patients are challenged often by education. And so sometimes they're not able, just being very sensitive to the fact that writing those informed consents on, a fifth or sixth grade level, speaking to people in their own language, like doing a better job of, not using those 50, like using the easier words, like that's one of the things I try and teach people right now, especially with discussion guides, right? Like the student I'm talking about, she likes to use words, the dentist words, right? And I'm like, okay, we got to use mouth, we got to use teeth, we got to, like you can't use high level words because the patients aren't going to understand them. And so just recognizing that, we're in a state that most people, not most, but there's a percentage of the population who, high school might have been all they went to. And so making sure that people feel comfortable and that
inclusivity,
and that you recognize that. So I would say those are probably the things that I think about the most as I think about patient groups and teaching and how to make sure that like the people that I train are respecting people. I tell them all the time, I say, like treat your patient like it's your mom or like it's your sister or your brother, like how would you want someone else to treat that person, right? And so just recognizing that patients come in all shapes and sizes but that doesn't mean that you shouldn't, like you need to give them the same level of respect as if somebody was doing this for you or your family.
Thanks for sharing.
I don't know if that answered your question.
Oh, no, a lot more, and especially putting the human side to things. And those barriers you mentioned are very all-encompassing and can also really impact what outcomes look like for patients. Imagine if not being able to understand what's in the consent form, what, the risk and, benefits or whatever the interventions they're being exposed to. Also hardcore issues like, transportation and low socio-economic status or income. So you've highlighted a lot of these barriers, and the hope is that as we get more and more into the years, these barriers will close, further and further away. But it doesn't seem like it's anytime soon. Maybe it's just the pessimist coming out in me today. But it's like every time we talk about these barriers, just seem to always be persistent. And I'm hoping for a
Yeah.
day where we won't have it. It's glaring, how to fix it. But I
Yeah.
imagine that it becomes that whole puzzle of if you fix one issue, another thing pops up, like the iron triangle, the doom of iron triangle and all that. But anyways, thanks for highlighting that. Um, the next set of questions I would like to ask you will be more of leadership. And I know you've done a lot. Kudos on all of your achievements, right? Now, in today's climate, conversations about inclusivity can feel more complex. We don't have to mention the elephant in the room, but we know what is being talked about here. Now, you've held leadership roles nationally and here at the OUHS. For you personally, what does it look like to live out inclusivity in research and education in Oklahoma right now?
That's a loaded question.
So,
I think that's the challenge, right? Is right now, we're signing things that say we're not doing that kind of work, and we're agreeing to, so what I think's funny is, and this, like, we've never excluded people in anything, right? Like just because it's called the Black Student Association doesn't mean everyone else couldn't come, right? It was never about that. It was always about making sure that people felt that they belong, right? That was always the goal. The goal was never this idea of keeping people out. And so, I mean, I think in some ways the mission remains the same, right? You just can't call it that. So like what you're saying is like, my whole being is to make sure people know that they belong, right? That because it is hard to be the only, right? It is hard to be the first. And so I think the challenge with today's society, though, is that by acting like everything's better, then you water it down. And so no, you no longer have these safe spaces. And I mean, there's a lot I could say, but we're being recorded. So I think that's what's sad is just that, it was never about keeping people out. It was just always about creating a safe space where you can say something like today they thought I was the angry Black woman and all I said was this, right? Like, right. And not having to defend that, right? Having to have people who were there who were able to say like, I got you, I know, right? And when you have these mixed environments, sometimes it's where now you either don't feel safe to say that, or you say it and now you have to defend it because somebody is saying like, well, maybe you shouldn't have said this, or maybe you're taking it wrong. And it's, it is what it is. And so I don't know, it is, I don't know, it is what it is. But I think, I think that's the sad part is that we no longer can create, kind of like these spaces. But, but, I don't know. I feel like, minority people are strong, they're resilient. We'll be fine. And so it's, I think about like what our ancestors went through and I'm like, oh my gosh, I don't have a dog attacking me. Like I can survive this, like.
But there's a dog there. It's just that we don't see it, and it makes it even more scary because and the stress it has on you, cortisol levels just shooting up. Like you don't see the dog, but it's there. It's even worse because how do you describe the dog to somebody else who doesn't see it?
Yeah,
but I know what you mean. I know what you mean. It's a different environment, but then the fear is still the same, right?
Right. So, to answer your original question and just about creating spaces of inclusivity, which is a hard word to say. I, in my current position, we have shifted it to more of an engagement type role for, all the obvious reasons. But I still feel like, that still gets to do what I want, right? I mean, it's still about, like we do we started last year doing like a Hudson Amazing Race. And so if you've ever watched the TV show Amazing Race, you get to, like, they tour over all these countries, right? And so what we did, in our college, we have a lot of students that are international. And so what we did is we had 2 students and they were able to showcase where they're from. And so we got
Nice.
food from Nairobi, and we got food from India, and so we created a game where you had to like taste the food and guess the ingredients. And then another room, you got to play a game that people grew up playing, in their country. And then another room, you learned how to ballroom dance, or the Bali dance, right? And so, and through that, we were able to really help people feel seen, and we were able to help people who maybe had never tried food outside of their comfort zone. I mean, oh my gosh, the food that we had that's from Nairobi, like people like killed it. Like I didn't even get any, like it was gone. Like people were just like in that room, just like killing it. I was like, oh my gosh, y'all, like calm down. And so we decided that we're going to do that every year. We're going to pick a different culture and just like have an amazing race every spring semester.
Nice.
And so it's not the stuff that we're not doing is like kind of promoting like Black History Month and stuff like that, but we can do other things like that. And so I don't know, it's really sad, but I think at the same time part of what I try to do is just make sure people do know that, because I remember being in places, I mean, I'm often in places where my voice is not heard, that my voice is not respected. And so I feel like at this grand old age, of 50, that I can now be the person who helps like tell
Someone
somebody
else,
that they're not being safe, like, hey, let that person speak. You're not allowing them to speak up or whatever. And so I think that's part of it too, is making sure that there is someone in the room to kind of let people know, but sometimes that gets tiring too, right? I mean, like when you're
you
like,
become the angry
don't be the
voice
person
and it's
again.
like, yeah, exactly.
Right.
But somebody's got to do it. Somebody's got to do
Somebody
it.
has to do it. Somebody has to.
Yeah. And I imagine for people like you and I, it's because you've been in the places where you've come a long way, moving from obscurity into the light, and now being in this position, almost like you owe it as a sense of duty to also bring people along, and your voice becomes louder, and it's almost like, why are you always so loud? Because we've got to do the work of belonging, of helping people feel like they're safe here and they belong here, and I want to be that face of representation, because I usually occupy spaces where there are not many people like me.
Exactly. And again, I'm trying to be the voice that says, you know what, just having people at the table is not enough. You have to respect when they speak, right? I don't feel like I belong until you allow me to speak and you respect what I say. If I'm speaking and people just like ignore me, or they wait till my white counterpart says it and then they respond, then that's not belonging.
It's not.
And so just trying to, do that work and let people know that like if you truly want to have a culture of belonging, then that means that when people speak, you listen, you respect that they are speaking from their truth and their experience. And I can never speak as a white man, right? Even though I'm married to a white man, right? And and so it's like recognizing that you can only talk about your own lived experience, and then whatever that lived experience is, that's the lived experience, right? And that's what I think is so frustrating when people try to like tell me that racism doesn't exist, or they try and tell me that I took something wrong, or and I'm like, no, you've never walked in my skin. Like, I've had people tell me stuff like, well, you have a PhD, so
that's not how it works.
Racism doesn't exist. And I'm like, I don't have a PhD on my forehead. Like, I got followed just the other day in the airport. I'm like, I went into an airport freaking convenience store, and the dude literally followed me in his little bitty, pop-up stand. And I was like, and at first I thought I was being crazy, right? So I did that whole like, If I
Yeah,
just
yeah.
walked around the
Gaslight yourself a
store for
little
like
bit.
10
Maybe
minutes
she's,
aimlessly, he followed me
yeah.
like the whole time. Yeah. I was like, no, he truly was following me. And I was like,
At the
wow.
airport,
And
are there
in
no safe
fact,
spaces
after I
anymore?
bought the stuff, yes, yes, at the airport. I was like, I was in
Oh
South
man,
Carolina and no,
I'm sorry.
North Carolina. I was in North Carolina. And I was just like, you've got to be kidding me. It's 2025, dude. Like, what? And so people were like, you should have just walked out. I'm like, yeah, but I had to get my guilt gifts for my kids. And I was like, I was already at the
Uh,
gate. And so even when I was putting I bought these two monkeys. And so even as I was putting
mm,
them in my bag, he sat there and watched me. Like even after I paid, he watched me.
no,
And then when I went to like he went to give me my change. He did that whole thing where he just like dropped the money. So he wouldn't touch me. It was a whole 100% trip. But it's like, it's that type of thing, right? Like that still happens, that people try and act like they don't. And it drives me crazy. And I'm like, the only way that I can help people that feel like they belong is when an international student comes to me and they tell me their experience, and I listen
yeah,
and I say,
yeah,
what can I do
yeah,
to help? Right?
yeah,
Like I don't
yeah,
get to tell them that they're wrong. I don't get to tell them that, like, that doesn't make sense. And so I
yeah,
think
yeah,
that's the other piece of it is I feel like I'm at the point now where I can help people because
yeah,
I'm not like
yeah,
afraid is the wrong word, but I just, I'm just at the point where I'm like, no, like what you're doing isn't helpful,
yeah, yeah,
like, so
yeah. Wow. Anyways, thanks for all you do. Thanks for all you do, and it makes a world of a difference. I think even being able to occupy those positions of leadership and showing that you can too. You can too. You can do
Oh,
it too. And
representation,
yeah,
100%.
yes, yes,
Yes.
yes. This is why
Yes.
we do what we do. This is why we have the fire burning inside of us because we've been giving
Right.
so much. We just want to give it back. Okay?
Yep. So true. So true.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So Oklahoma has a growing pipeline of first generation college students, right? And mentoring is very close to your heart. What philosophies or personal values guide the way you mentor students and colleagues? Like, how do you guide them?
Yeah. So that's a good tie-in from the last because I really do 100% believe that it's all about the fact that I made it, so you can too. And so that's what I love to tell students. I love to just like, especially the first generation students or those students who, are struggling. I'm like, if I can make it, you can too, right?
Yeah.
And then I do really try to meet people where they are. I don't believe that everyone should take, 16 hours of first semester or 12 hours. I'm like, okay, let's talk about you and what works for you. And I try and
Mm,
explain to students also that like, if it takes you an extra semester, what's the big deal? Nobody's going to ask you when you get a degree. No one's going to say, how long did it take you to get your master's degree? No one's going to say, did it take you, one extra semester? Like, no, that's not going to be a question. And so, like you have to do what's right for you and you
yeah.
don't have to like compete with anybody else.
Mhm.
But I definitely have a special place in my heart for first gen because I remember how hard it was. And you're doing so much outside of class and if you're not first gen, you don't get it. Like I still take care of my family and my, my nieces, my nephews, my sister, whoever. And I didn't realize that was different until literally maybe 5 years ago when I was reading
Mhm.
an article and they were talking about the tax of first generation students. And I was like, I literally never even thought about the fact that, because what the article was talking was that people who are not first generation, they're able to focus on their studies because
Mm,
they're not usually working, they're not usually
yeah,
taking care of da 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 da
yeah,
da da.
yeah.
And I was like, oh my gosh, that's so
Makes
true.
sense. Yeah, yeah.
And it's so normal for me because,
You went through that.
like I
Yeah,
said,
yeah,
my
yeah.
yeah, and I that's just who I've always been,
Being,
like from
yeah,
a
yeah.
very young age. And, I was always just kind of like more responsible and, all the things, right? And so and then I remember talking to some of my friends and they were like, yeah. And I was like, I never thought about like, Sally over there.
Mm,
All she has
mm,
to do is like go to class and go
mm,
home. I was
mm,
like,
mm.
oh my gosh, I can't imagine doing, like that's just so, and so I think even that type of stuff is like helping the students that I mentor recognize that, like, yeah, working full time and going to school, is it hard? Sure. But if I can do it, you can do it, right? And does that mean that you might have to take an extra semester or an extra 2 semesters? Okay, it is what it is, though. And don't let somebody treat you like that's a weird thing. Like, I know that there's certain faculty who are like, oh, you shouldn't work full time. But you know what? If you have no money, sometimes you have to do what you have to do.
Yes,
and so,
yes.
and that's, I feel like, again, that's what I try to do as a mentor, but also as a faculty member when we're around the table having these conversations. And I'm like, you know what? But they're working full time. And people try and say, like, well, maybe they shouldn't. If they've got bills and if they're supporting people, they have to do what they have to do. And so, yeah.
So many layers to that. And I love how you're talking about your lived experiences and being able to connect with what others might be going through. Like, for example, with the whole first generation college, bit of it. And so thanks for highlighting all of that. Thank you. So as we are rounding off, I had, some questions about, let me ask one more question about mentoring. Were there some times where you realized that a mentoring pair wasn't going to work for you, whether you as a mentee or a mentor? How did you let that go, by the way?
So I will say,
I feel like you're very good to answer this question. I feel like you have a good story about this. I don't know. I just have a strong feeling.
So I will say, I have to be careful here. Because people know these people.
I know.
So I will say that I had a mentor who I think ended up not being the person that I thought they were. And they said some things that were just not okay. And that was really, really hard. And I remember reaching out to some other people who I trusted and just asking them, like, what can I do? This person's been my mentor for a really long time. This is what they said. This is what they did. I don't know what to do now. And, and they were kind of like, okay, take a minute, take some days, get the emotion out of it, meet with them, try and have a conversation. And maybe maybe you guys can get over it. And I did that, and the conversation didn't go like I wanted it to. And I just had to realize that sometimes things do have to end, and that's, that's okay. Right. And so that was a really hard, it was really, really hard because it was somebody who'd been my mentor for a really long time.
Yeah.
But they said some things that were not okay. And so that was one of those where you just realize that, like, they were there when you, for that time period, and now they're not. And that's, and that's okay. Like, things don't always have to stay forever. Right.
Yeah.
And then as a mentor, I've had, I can think of one challenging mentee where we just weren't vibing well. Like, it was weird because we were really cool. And then it was where I had to start pushing them, and they didn't respond well to that. And so I reached out to some people, and I thought, how can I handle this better? And it ended up where I got some tips from people about how to kind of say, okay, when this communication happens, let's do a written summary, and try and see if that could help propel them. And at the end of it got a little better, but I was able to get them to graduation. And so I think what I learned from that is that sometimes, it doesn't have to be perfect. You just have to, it has to get to where you need to go. Because it was definitely too far down the path for us to stop. It would have been really detrimental. And so sometimes you just have to be able to communicate to get it to functional. Right. And so But what I learned from that as a mentor was to incorporate communication, that type of communication earlier. So what I do now is I say stuff to people like, tell me how you listen, or tell me the best way for you to take instruction. Is it written? Is it oral? And just recognize that everybody's different, right? And then I try to also ask them, kind of like, basically, I know my personality, and I'll say stuff like, I am a sarcastic person. Tell me if that is something that you're okay with. And if it's not, then I will manage myself appropriately to not be sarcastic with you, right?
Yeah,
because I do say stuff like to my students, something like, oh my gosh, that was so stupid, right? But I don't mean they're stupid, right?
Yeah.
But some people take it that way. And so so now at the beginning of, of a mentor-mentee meeting, I will say, this is who I am, but I can change it. So if I said something like that, how would that be offensive to you? Would that hurt you? And if somebody's like, yeah, then I'll say, okay, great. I won't do that, And so that's kind of the stuff that I've learned from the kind of bad situations. So I think from a mentee standpoint, sometimes you just have to realize that it's time to let that relationship go.
Yeah.
And then I think that on the other hand, sometimes you just have to be willing to communicate enough upfront to make sure that you guys are on the same page, so that it can be a functional relationship, or a strong relationship.
I love that. I think it's also that maturity in knowing when to let things go. But also trying not to, as far as within your control, don't burn bridges, even when the person has, misbehaved badly. And also learning how to course correct whenever you maybe not say the right thing very well, you framed it in a way that doesn't come up as positive, making yourself really heard and clarifying what you really mean. That could be a way to go.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. And being willing to, just like with parents, being like, just as parents, sometimes we have to say, that's not what I meant. I'm sorry. I'm sorry that I hurt you. That's not what I meant. I didn't mean that, and then it's on them to take it or not take it. Right. Like you can't, you can't predict or you can't decide for them. You can just tell them what your heart was, and, and then at that point it is what it is. But then there's going to be some times where, you have to be like, okay, like maybe that person can no longer be in your inner circle. Right. Like,
and that's okay.
Like, okay. Right. And that's okay.
Wasn't that somewhere I read about how people come into your life for a season? Like some people are just like Santa Claus and they come and go, and that's okay. Don't
and that's
hold on too tightly if not needed. Yeah. Okay. This next question is a bit low. It's like 21 because I want to ask about networking, but also how OSCTR, who's the sponsor of this podcast, has played a role in that. Now, networking can sometimes feel transactional, but you've spoken about it as building genuine connections. Now, how have networks shaped your journey? And what advice would you give to early career researchers about cultivating meaningful ones? And if you can just sprinkle a little bit about how OSCTR has been an integral part of it, that would be a good shameless plug for us. Thank you.
Yeah, I think the OSCTR does a really good job of bringing people together in order to network, right? Bringing people who are at that same walk of life together. And so I definitely feel like that's part of it is reaching out to the other people who are, also junior faculty, who are mid-career faculty, who got their first KO1, who got their first RO1, because you are experiencing that together. I think that's a great way to network. But I also think that it's really important, if you do have a mentor, to tag along with that mentor and let them introduce you to people. I remember when I was very early on, Dr. George would introduce me to everybody. And it was so like, at the time I was like, oh my gosh, these are people who wrote all these papers. Like, these are like the big people. And he would just be like, yeah, this is Dee. She's really smart or whatever. And now as a mentor, I do that. When I go to a meeting, I'm going to bring so-and-so along, and I'm going to be like, this is Dr. Rouse, or this is Dr. So-and-so. And that's what I think your role is as a mentor, is to open those doors and connect people. And I remember, and even helping people realize, even other people on campus, like if you know that someone else is doing research that's kind of similar, reaching out to them.
Yes.
And because I will say that that you emailing somebody, the worst they can do is say no, right?
Yes.
That's the worst they can do.
Yes.
And I have never had anybody just flat out tell me they wouldn't want to work with me. I have had people tell me, I'm too busy.
Yeah.
Why don't you, have you thought about so-and-so? Right. And so I did that even for my career development mentor, for my KO1. I reached out to a person I never knew. I had gone to a meeting and they presented, and I was like, oh my gosh, this is the person that I want to mentor me. And it was in patient reported outcomes because we didn't have anybody here that could be my mentor. So I emailed her and I said, you were amazing. I loved your talk. I need a mentor for my career development, award. And she told me, I'm really busy and I'm about to retire, but why don't you reach out to this person?
Wow.
And so I reached out to that person and I said, I told her the whole story. I reached out to so-and-so. She recommended you. Would you be willing to be, a mentor for me and for my career development award? And she said, well, let's talk. We talked on the phone. And we were cool, and she did it. And, I got my career development award. So I would also say, just don't be afraid to reach out to people. Because again, the worst they can do is say no. What do you have to lose? Right. And so I would say, when you think about networking, go to meetings with your eyes open, think about, what people personality wise mesh with you. Because there's going to be some people that just naturally you feel comfortable with. Right. And so use your mentor's connections as well. And even ask your mentor, hey, can you introduce me to some of the people in the field? And if they're a mentor worth their salt, then they will do that for you. That's their job, is to help, break down those walls. And so, but networking is super important, super, super important. It's a small world out there. It's a really small world. And so it really is, who you know. I'm not saying that you don't have to also have some kind of talent, but you want your name in the room, right? And be nice. I can't tell you how much just being a nice person opens doors. And don't just be nice to people you think matter. Like, be nice to everybody. Be nice to the person who answers the phone. Be nice to the person who's doing, the grant person. Be nice to the secretary, because again, it's a small world. Everybody talks to everybody. And you don't know how much power that person has to your future. So don't just go around being mean to people, just be a nice person. And that's what gets seen and heard, and I'm not saying to be fake, but I mean, just recognizing that you can help somebody's day just by saying, hey, I see you. Right. And that's all you have to do. And then that person is going to be like, you know what, Dr. Terrell's really nice. And then they might say that to the dean, and the dean's now talking about you, and you aren't even in the room. You know what I'm saying? So that's what I would say, is don't be afraid to reach out to strangers that you think could be good collaborators. Be nice to people and ask your mentor to open doors for you.
Thank you. Those are really great. I mean, sticky notes, and I love what you said about you miss 100% of the shots you don't take. The worst I can say is no, but it could also be a yes, right? And also highlighting the importance of providing visibility to our mentees, like, when you introduce them, saying a little bit about them, and that boost of confidence can definitely go a long way. So thank you. Now, to wrap up, I'd like to step back and ask about your bigger picture, right? You do so much researching, mentoring, leadership. Those take a lot of energy. What practices or mindsets help you stay grounded and aligned with your purpose?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think that I do a lot with the wisdom group on campus, which is women in science, dentistry, mental health, or medicine and health. And we do a lot of sessions on self-care. We do a lot of sessions on resilience. And I think going to those types of sessions just really helps rejuvenate me. And I think also just being around like-minded people is really helpful to again, like, I went to a meeting or a wisdom thing just a couple of weeks ago, and it was Dr. Belinda Hippolyte who was there. And she said that everybody needs at least 5 people who you could count on to be there for you, and they don't need anything from you, that you could like just have a breakdown and they would be there for you. And, and I really just thought about that in terms of like, do I have 5, right? And what can I do to make sure I do? Because I'm not sure I do have 5 right now. And so, but her point was that like, you have to take care of yourself, and you have to have those people who allow you to just like have that day, right? And so I definitely have a group of people that's on a text thread that all of us are kind of like at the same level in our careers. We're all Black women, and we all at different institutions. We met, through our work with ASH, and so we are able to kind of text each other and just be that safe space for people, for each other. Like when somebody says something crazy to you, you can be like da 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 da,
unfiltered, just
and you can put it in the text. And
yes.
And so sometimes, I feel like that's what I kind of need. Some, is just and sometimes, and just to being real honest, because I am, a first generation college student, sometimes my family doesn't get what I'm experiencing. Right. And so, and I think sometimes, my circle from home or from my community, they see me as Dr. D, that the successful person, and which I'm not saying I'm not saying that, but sometimes you need people who are at that same stressor level with you to understand something like, I'm going up for promotion, I'm stressed, and not have to explain what that means, or this paper is never getting written, like I don't know how I'm going to carve out any more time to put in this grant, or, and that's the kind of stuff that sometimes you do need people that are like under those same pressures to vent to. I think to keep you sane, you definitely need your family and stuff to keep you healthy and happy and all the things. But I do think it's important to also have those group of people who, you can connect with at that, especially if you're in academia, like at that like academic level. Especially like I said, with the grants and the papers and all of that.
Yes. The outside world, they don't really understand that, and spot on that. I have my own group as well. I think for especially female minority people in academia, find your tribe where you can just be yourself, as naked as you can. Don't even worry about filters, because they can see what you're trying to say. You don't have to worry about mincing words or trying to edit it and polish it. Just say it, and you can ugly cry, and they can wrap your arms around you. And also, don't be a crumple snatcher. Make sure you're also contributing to the group dynamic. You're giving, feedback. You're also providing the support that you want to get from that group. And it saved my life. I've had it since I started, my academic journey, and just them knowing my past self and my current self, and helping me also remind me of who I am, especially when I go off road and I'm like, oh, this is so great. Like, no, that's not who you are. FYI, blah, 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 blah. So get you your tribe. Get you your tribe, everyone. Get you your tribe. All right. Thanks for
that's a good point, because
sorry, go ahead.
No. I think that's so true, because also just like you said, like sometimes the world's going to tell, and this is, just like what you are with your kids, right? The world's going to tell you something crazy. And your tribe's the one who's like, no, ignore that.
That's not who you are.
Don't listen to that. And you have to be like, oh yeah, you're right.
Yeah.
You really do need those people to kind of remind you, like, or even like you said, like when you want to go, maybe to the left, and they're going to be like, okay, look, don't let them take you there.
No.
And you're like, okay, you're right.
That's not your fight.
That's not who you are. Don't.
Yes.
That's right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah,
let them be them. And and so you have to make sure that they are people who are going to help you, not necessarily, like you don't want someone who's always like, you should quit. You need people who's going to be able to say okay, let's think about this, or
and be truthful too. Being able to say truth. Exactly. And be truthful too about what you're going through. and maybe your role in whatever is happening, like be very honest about everything. That honesty goes a long way. Otherwise, you won't get good feedback. Don't lie to them. Don't lie to
Right.
yourself. And just say it as it is. The things you did wrong and the things you didn't say right, and so it can
Yeah.
help you walk off that ledge. It's just been so mind freeing for me to have that tribe.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
All right.
I agree.
Now, as you look to the future of clinical and transitional research in Oklahoma and beyond, what gives you hope, right? And what do you think we must do differently to truly create an inclusive research ecosystem? So what gives you hope, and what can we be doing differently or to kind of create that inclusive research ecosystem?
I don't know, right? I don't know what gives me hope right now. I hope that we will come back to where we were. I think we were at this place where people really started to talk about diversity, equity, and inclusion in all spaces, right? They were really wanting to know how to do it right. They were asking, we know we haven't been doing this right. What should we do better? And it was at this like precipice, right? This place where it was like, wow, that's right. Think of it in clinical trials. Think of it here. Think of it here. And it just all stopped. And I think for me, that was really hard because I was like, so were you never really wanting, like, how could it just be like gone so quickly? How could we be okay with just like, okay, nope, there's banned words. We can't use the words. We can't do. And that was really, really hard for me to. And so the hope that I have is that we'll come back to where we were, that we will recognize that we are better when we respect where people are coming from, and that we aren't all equal, like that we have to respect the fact that we're coming from different places. And so when you're thinking about equality, what that means is recognizing that we're not all given from birth the same, opportunities. And so that we do have to create, different things so that people can, like, it's just not fair to like act like the person who was born, like even my kids, they're going to have way different opportunities than I ever had. Right. And so recognizing that that's just the way the life is. And so what can we do to help those people who are born to the single parent who didn't have all these opportunities, like, and quit acting like, oh yeah, well, pull yourself up by your bootstraps, And so I think we were, I mean, like I was part of this movement and I saw it and I was like, this is amazing. We're finally here. And so I just hope that we can get back to that. Like we really were at this point where like, it was in the grants that you wrote. It was in, it was everywhere. And so I don't know. I just hope that we really can get back to recognizing that this, the way it needs to be is for us to be very intentional about inclusion. It's not going to happen without intent. It's not going to happen without someone requiring it. The NIH recognized that minorities were not getting grants as much as the majority, and they put things in place to help that. I hope that we can get back to that. I hope that that we'll realize again that this isn't something that people haven't earned. It's just the fact that like the system is not fair. And so I don't know. I hope that it will come back. I don't know what to tell you about right now though.
You're so hopeful, and that's good to know. Maybe I checked that a while ago, but I love your hope and optimism, and maybe I can just tag on to that to really help because it's been quite a journey, the past few months. Yeah. But thank you for that hopeful message. Now, as you know, the year is coming to an end. It's a season of reflection, rest, and sometimes, overwhelming feelings, come up in so many people. how do you intentionally make space for rest and renewal? And what does that look like for you?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I would say that, so I turned 50 last week, and one of the things that I'm doing is creating a 50-item bucket list. And so these are 50 things that I want to do between now and when I turn 51. And I went on Facebook and I asked my friends, like, what should I put on this bucket list, right? And a lot of people talked about, rest and sleep and stuff like that. And so I am going to do a much better job this year of taking time for myself. And whether or not that means, I know some people who they create their calendar with all of their rest in there first, and then they add all the other things. But I am going to, I am going to like build in take off a random day off of work just to go to the movies. I'm going to read 3 books this year. I'm going to, I'm going to just put in a weekend with some girlfriends, we're going to go to Santa Cruz. Sorry. And so I'm building those into my calendar now. And so I think that recognizing that, like, again, you have to be intentional with some of this. And I think in the past I wasn't. And so what I did this year, I actually just last week, I bought a planner, but not like a normal planner, but it was a goal planner. And it breaks it into the little segments. And I also realized that I have to put, with this bucket list, I have to put dates with some of these things, because if I don't, I'm never going to do them. And so for me, at least, I have to be more intentional if I'm really going to do it. And so that's what I'm trying to work on this year, is just being intentional about, and I'm not, I know, and again, giving yourself grace, because we all have really demanding jobs. So I know I'm not going to get it right all the time, but just, trying to go to the gym, trying to rest, trying to drink more water, all the things that, we need to do, that I often put off doing. And so I'm going to try to do, I'm like, I need to go to the gym at least 3 times a week, and so I'm trying to do more realistic goals this time. I think sometimes I'm like, I'm going to go every single day. I'm going to, and that's not realistic, at least not for me. So at least not at this time. And then also, like I said, give myself grace, because there's going to be times where my son's like, lay down with me, mommy, and I fall asleep and I don't get back on the treadmill or whatever. And recognizing that that's okay, that if he needed me to sleep with him, that's okay. That's what I needed to do at that time.
And it's still taking time for yourself and for him as well. 2 in 1. Knock that out of the way.
Right.
Yeah. Thanks for sharing that. I remember Dr. Valerie Williams, she had recommended putting everything in your calendar, like your rest time. And I was like, usually work calendar is for work. It's like, no, put everything in there. You want to go to the gym, when you want to go shop, when you want to go. I'm like, okay. I've tried it, but it feels very, expository in a way. I haven't gone out all the way, but I've been putting like my gym time, my vacation time, and I'm slowly working my way up to that. It's been 7 years since she gave me that advice. I haven't fully implemented it, but it's still at the back of my mind. But thanks for that reminder. All right. As we round up, Farrell, so one of the things we do on the podcast is we have guests leave questions for the next guest. They don't know who the guest is, and as a result, I've had a lot of. I never had episodes where I've had like 2 people join, 4 people join. So we have more questions than anticipated guests. So if you can pick a number from 1 to 11, and I can tell you who, if you choose a number, I can tell you who asked the question and what questions they asked. And by the time you're done answering this question, you can also leave a question for the next guest. So 1 to 11.
All right. Number 7.
Okay. Oh, you actually answered this. This is from Hope Reeves, one of our student interns. She wanted to ask, what kind of quality do you look for in a mentor? And how do you know if they are right for you?
Yeah. So you want qualities, you want someone to be kind, but you also want someone to be honest.
Yeah.
You want someone who respects you as a person. You want to make sure that when you're talking to them, they're not just like waiting for you to get done so they can talk. You want to make sure that someone who's listening to you, who sees you as a person, who values as a person. And I think when you give them something, you want to receive red marks. You want track changes. Because that means they value it. You don't want to look for people who are just going to be like, oh, that's great. Because everything you do isn't great, and it's not going to get better if they never, do that for you. So you want someone who can give you hard, honest feedback, but someone who also sees you as a person and values you, who you are and what you want. They're not trying to just have you do what they want. They're like, okay, even if you had to leave, if this is the right choice for you, then I'm going to support you in that.
Yeah. I love that. Kind, treat you as a person and respect you. What question would you like to leave for the next guest? Not knowing who they are and all of that.
I think I would like the next person to say, what do they think we could do better in terms of creating a more inclusive atmosphere on campus?
Okay. So, I love that. Thank you for that. Now, finally, will be this. We didn't really get to explore your family side of things, as far as your kids and your husband and all of that. When all is said or done, given the kind of work you do and the impact it has with the patient voices and highlighting them, what kind of modeling would that look like for your kids whenever they are old enough to kind of know what mommy really, really does? What are you hoping to leave behind for them to know about your work? Or if they even get to listen to this in the future. Yeah.
That's really, really funny. So my son is 9, and he likes to say that I'm not the fun kind of doctor. And so he says that.
It's your people, my goodness.
Like, no, I was like, what does that mean, son? And so the way he says it is like, well, I mean, he said you're a mommy and a researcher. No, he says you're a mommy and a scientist, but not the fun kind. And I was like, what does that mean? And he said that the fun kind are the ones who, put things in a flask and they explode. So I was like, oh, a chemist, you're right. I'm not the fun kind. And so, but I mean, in terms of legacy, right? Like, I hope that my children, and my daughter's 14, so I think she kind of sees this, but I want them to know that I fought for people who didn't have a voice. I think more than anything, I want to be people to remember me as someone who was kind, who saw people where they were, and who wasn't afraid to stand up for the people who maybe was afraid to stand up for themselves.
Wow. Thank you so much. This has been such a, I love just that reflection, and I know everything you're doing right now is definitely leading to that. But this has been such a wonderful time with you in the studio today, just learning more about your work, what drives your passion, and the backstory. Because I felt like I got to know you even more just in sharing your story, and I just want to thank you for all of the vulnerability infused in it, but also the resilience and the wonder that you are. And I just want to say thank you for coming on today.
Well, thank you for having me. It was a lot of fun. So I appreciate it. I appreciate you having me and listening to me ramble.
Oh no, it wasn't ramble. It was good. It was good. All right. So to our listeners, that's it. That's it for today's conversation with Dr. Terrell, a researcher, a mentor, and leader who reminds us that science is beyond the data, but also about the people, purpose, and belonging. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to subscribe, share with a colleague, and check out our show notes for more resources. You can also read more about Dr. Terrell's journey from a small town farm in Oklahoma to becoming a nationally recognized clinical epidemiologist in her feature with the American Society of Hematology, which we'll tag in the show notes. As always, thank you for tuning in to the GROklahoma Podcast, where research grows community. Until next time, keep asking questions, keep making connections, and keep growing Oklahoma. Bye for now. All right, thank you. All right. Thank you so much. Take care. Bye. Yeah.